Okay, class, we're back and we're doing Epidermis B. Epidermis, integumentary system, Epidermis B. Okay, we had talked on the Stratum Basale. That's the layer that the mitosis generally occurs. So now we're going to the next layer, and here are desmosomes. Remember we said that the Stratum Basale is hooked to the underlayer, which is the basement membrane, by a half desmosome. Okay, and if it breaks, that's where you get into blisters. Okay, so we'll go further. We'll mention that. The Stratum Spinosum is called the prickle cell layer. Why? Because even though the cells do not appear, they're really more of a square cell, but when you stain them, you're staining the keratin intermediate filaments. Where the keratin intermediate filaments? At the corners. Now what will happen when you put the stain in, then the brain fills in. The brain fills in, and since you're staining only the corners of the cell, then what will happen, it will look more prickly. So when you stain only the corners of the cell, it'll look more prickly because it'll look like that's all that's there, are those particular corners of the cell. And so that's what we call the prickle cell layer, the prickle cell layer, the Stratum Spinosum. Here's the cells here. They have that prickly appearance to them, that prickly appearance. But that's because of how the stain stains it. That's how the stain stains it. It's not the fact that they really have that appearance. Here's that prickle cell. See, it's staining that keratin. And that keratin's at the corner of the cell, so it looks like it's spiny. Okay? And that's the second layer. Now remember, the second layer can do some mitosis too under certain circumstances. Okay? The Stratum Granulosum, by the time you get to the granulosum, the cells are starting to produce chemicals that are stored in vesicles called granules. One of those chemicals is keratohyalin, and the other is something called lamellar substance, or odlin substance. The keratohyalin surrounds the keratin intermediate filaments and produces the mature keratin. So the mature keratin, I'm going to say, is the keratin intermediate filament surrounded by the keratohyalin. That gives a nice waterproofing. Now that's going to allow waterproofing within the cell, so water can't go straight through the cell easily. Okay. What about water trying to squeeze between the cells? That's what we call lamellar substance or odlin substance. It's a chemical that is secreted laterally from the cell, to try to keep the water from slipping between the cells. So let's go back. The mature keratin tries to keep the water from being able just to escape straight through the cells, and the lamellar substance tries to keep it from escaping between the cells. All of which are in granules, and that's what you call the Stratum Granulosum, the Stratum Granulosum. So waterproofing in cell, Stratum Granulosum, to keep water from going through the cell, and odlin substance, lamellar substance, between the cells to keep water from slipping between the cells, So that's what you're looking at there, okay? All right. Then we get to the Stratum Lucidum, which is called, now remember, the Stratum Lucidum is only located in thick skin. The Stratum Lucidum is only located in thick skin. Another name for thick skin is glabrous skin. Another name for it is hairless skin. Hairless skin. This is the palms and soles. It's a thin, transparent layer. There, this keratohyalin has been further enzymatically acted upon to form a substance called elidin. Now, the reason you can't see it is because of the stain. Now remember, cells are translucent. So we have to put a stain on to make cells appear in our tissue sections. So elidin does not pick up the stain that well. That's why it looks lucid, translucent. But again, that's only in thick skin, glabrous skin. Okay, so we've gotten that far. Then we get to the stratum corneum. Now, the stratum lucidum and the stratum corneum, the cells really are dead, to be honest. They're too far away from the blood supply. They're too far away from the blood supply. Diffusion does good here because you got to have a lot of oxygen to mitosis, and you got to have some. You got to do some in the granulosum to produce it. But once you get up in here, hey, those cells are dead. So you have about 20 to 30 rows of dead flat cells. Remember, you always name by the top. See, the bottom cells, remember chapter 4, are more cuboidal, but the top, we always name on the stratified by the top. So you constantly are knocking these cells off. But as I alluded to, the stratum disjunctum, which is not in your book, the stratum disjunctum are those two or three layers at the top that you flake off. It's really hard to see those at all. But if you have dandruff or psoriasis, seborrhea, then you'll see that, that flaking off aspect. So we now have named Basale, Spinosum, Granulosum. We had Lucidum. Again, this is not thick skin. And the Stratum Corneum. Okay. So that's where we are. Okay. Now, so all the cells we have talked about up to now, all the cells were keratinocytes. So the stratum basale, the stratum spinosum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum lucidum, and the stratum corneum, our discussion was really on keratinocytes. Now we're coming into melanin. We want to now talk about skin coloration. I'm actually going to start a new video and start here to talk about skin coloration. And so this is going to be a new video.